As both Megumi and Maki are out of the fight as of right now for obviously different reasons, I thought it would be a good idea to look at who would win this fight. Starting with Maki, which is easier to scale, we are given several statements consistently comparing her to Toji, which narratively makes sense for her to be relative to Toji, obviously outside of Toji's battle IQ experience and arsenal. To compare it to Megumi, we actually have a direct way of doing it, which we first must look at Toji's fight with Megumi during Shibuya. First, I want to establish Toji and Maki are around the level of Three Finger Sukuna. We have two direct statements of Megumi saying Toji is on the level of Three Finger Sukuna. Obviously, he would be referring to weakened Three Finger Sukuna, as that's the only Three Finger Sukuna he bought. And as we know, not having his heart is considered a nerf. Megumi is obviously able to perceive both characters, and his Shikigami are able to react to both of them as well. To make it even more consistent, when Maki and Yuji fight Meguna, Maki is able to somewhat match him with his nerf output, which was at the lowest around 10%, so around 1.5 finger level. And since Maki would be around a weakened Three Finger Sukuna level, it would be around between those two. If you try to average it, it would make Maki around 2 Finger Sukuna level, as it's between 1 finger, 1.5 finger and 3 finger. Megumi, after being exhausted, using a domain expansion, was low on curse energy. As we see, a domain uses up a lot of it, even for disaster curses. Megumi, after this, visualizes a stronger version of himself, which is able to react and dodge Toji's attacks, as well as his Shikigami do the same thing. To put even more consistency behind it, Dagon is able to react to Toji, and even the pre-visualization Megumi was shown a relative if not higher curse energy output. After this, Megumi gets to full tank and trains for about 2 weeks until the calling games. We know this as there's almost 2-week time skip between those two events. Not only is established Jujutsu sorcerers train daily, but we see blatant improvement of Megumi's curse technique and domain expansion from Shibuya to calling games. So he indeed trained. So we know that a way weaker Megumi should be able to react to Maki. Obviously a way stronger Megumi should be easily do it as well, especially with his Shikigami, which are faster than himself, and obviously when he gets 120% amp in his domain expansion. I want to touch on something that might be the case for end of calling games Megumi, before he gets taken over. We know Sukuna is able to summon a tamed deer, bull and Maharaga, but there really isn't any time for him to do it, specifically for all three at that time, as he takes the bath and then directly goes to Sendai Colony. So take this with a grain of salt, but I believe Megumi likely tamed at least the deer and the bull between the time skip of end of Reiji fight to right before he gets taken over, as there is a time skip between those two events. Now to go who would win in a fight, I think it would usually be pretty close, and I would probably give an upper hand to Maki. But Megumi unfortunately kinda hard counters with his domain, and to explain that we have to go into his fight with Reiji, where it's explained you have to reinforce your footing with curse energy unless you want to drown in the shadows where there is no oxygen or resistance, and Maki cannot do that. As well as her consent to enter a domain also wouldn't really work against Megumi, as not only Megumi doesn't have a barrier made of like curse energy for her to consent, but he uses physical structure as barrier. As for Soul Split Katana, it would be pretty hard for her to land a hit on Megumi, as not only it would be multiple opponents at once who are all able to react to her, but anytime he would get hit, he could just substitute a shadow clone instead of himself. I guess to make it more fair and go into more hypothetical territory, where Megumi is unable to use his domain expansion, which means Maki will not get sucked into the shadows and Megumi cannot clone himself to avoid any fatal strikes from shadow clones. as both hard counter characters like Maki. To compensate for this, as I established the possibility earlier that Megumi might have Tranquil Deer and Double, as well as Totality of Nue and Orochi, which to explain why he would have that specifically. We know that Sukuna has the 10 shadows from Megumi and only builds upon it. As we learned during Sukuna's fight with Gojo, that Nue has Totality of Orochi, which makes sense as Orochi was destroyed by Three-Finger Sukuna during chapter 9. As for the argument that Totality would apply automatically, we know this is false, as Megumi only makes Totality of the Divine Dog during his fight with Hanami, as when he summons it at the start of the Goodwill event, it's in his normal state, while later, when we get explanation what Totality is, we see Totality of the Divine Dog. So it just means Megumi never chose to make Totality of Nue, likely because of its mobility and versatility in its normal form compared to when it would be massive. The deer would not be that effective in this fight though, except when Megumi takes damage by something that's not Soul Split Katana, but there is a possibility of Megumi able to perceive the soul and healing with the deer after this, but this is only possibility which has not yet to be proven. Totality of the Nue would really only help as a distraction, as it cannot really damage Maki that much as we see when Sukuna uses it, but it might be that because Angel got rid of it before it could deal more damage. And for the bull, would be very good addition, especially when Maki wouldn't know its ability, which would able to at least cause some damage or make an opening for Megumi to attack, which helps either way. Under these conditions, I think the fight could go either way, as both characters have solid arguments and win conditions, unless Megumi uses his domain, which just hard counters Maki. I did want to talk about hypothetical current Megumi with additions of everything Sukuna unlocked for him and the MC got, but I'll probably make a separate video on it in the future, likely when he comes back to the story.